Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, where we, despite talking a ton of realignment as of late, we talk all things BYU and Big 12. And tonight we are talking about some very good news that came to BYU fans this week with the signing of Egor Demin, I think is how you say it, is what I'm hearing. And joining us to talk about who is arguably BYU's biggest recruit across any sport ever is Ryan Evan from Keepin It Orange and Blue podcast at 200columns.com, a fellow cohort from the college Huddle. Thank you, Ryan, so much for joining me.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. I'm glad you reached out, and this just so happened to be a topic that I had been focusing on for the last couple of weeks because he was a player that the Illinois staff was going after, and they were really very intrigued with him. Obviously, he's a great player. He's going to be a lottery pick in next year's draft, and something that I think BYU fans should be excited about. You guys are going to get to see a future pro just every day there, in is it the Marriott Center?
The Marriott, yeah,
Yeah,
the Marriott Center, yeah. A lot
yes,
of people Marriott, yeah.
yeah. So it's it's the college version of the Delta Center, the old where the jazz we play, So, but yeah, so you guys should have a lot of fun. I'm ready to dig in and talk about them a little bit more. So I'm sure you're excited.
Very excited. And so part of why I want to do this video and why you are probably so much more well versed on him is because Illinois was recruiting him, going after him for quite some time. Whereas BYU fans, I mean, this kind of popped up as a blip, as a kind of a rumor, and then all of a sudden it was like picking up steam, and then it was a done deal. And so it happened really fast for BYU fans. So I think we're still digesting this. So first and foremost, he's over in Europe.
Yep.
He's playing for Real Madrid, but a very good European program, and he's come up through their ranks. And by all accounts, like you mentioned, he is a projected lottery pick in next year's draft, which is going to be a deep draft.
Yeah.
So why is it that more teams weren't going after him?
Well, I'll kind of explain a little bit about him and how. So Real Madrid, big time, them and Barcelona, the two best and biggest basketball academies in Spain. They produce big time talents, in the Euro League, and guys that get drafted pretty much yearly come from there. He's 6'9". He is a very good facilitator when he has the ball in his hands. He's elite in transition, obviously very long. He's very good is a very good ball handler. He's a very, very good passer. He's fun to watch. And many teams were in on him. So, Arkansas with John Calipari was in there. I think they weren't really wanting to wait until this kind of late necessarily on him. I think there was other guys that they were like John L. Davis from FAU ended up signing with them. I think they just had more, what's the word, sticks in the fire. They had a lot going, and I don't think they necessarily just had to have him to be the top guy in their class. They did want him. Illinois was in there heavy, and I think Kansas was in there as well. But so he's a guy who is just good enough to make a team, a NCAA tournament team that may not have been, let's say, I don't know how your roster looked beforehand, but I think he's definitely probably a very nice cherry on top of it. I know Mark Pope took some very good players with him to Kentucky. I saw that Jackson Davis just came back in from the draft, and he ended up going to join Pope there in Lexington. And a couple other of you guys had some pretty solid players that left. I think one or two more joined him at Kentucky, right?
Yeah, he took the big recruit that he was off on his mission, and he was just returning. And before he even got home, he flipped to his recruitment to Kentucky. There was another
one of the guards I thought went.
He was so he was looking at Kentucky, and then he ended up staying back. So
okay, good. Yeah, and actually, for any persons wondering, like, what's this Illinois guy? I actually watched plenty of BYU games. Once Illinois and Duquesne and BYU were all in that little same quadrant in the NCAA tournament, there was a chance that Illinois was going to play BYU. So I actually watched quite a bit of it. So I kind of got familiar with your guys' team. So it was definitely say this guy should help them stay in the NCAA tournament team. So basically, long story short, Illinois put out an offer, NIL related, that they weren't going to budge on because they weren't going to break their entire infrastructure of where they wanted to finish with their NIL recruitment and their money. And they would have literally spent pretty much every dime of it if they would have given Demin Egor Demin Demin his what he was asking. And Illinois was just that's how they were. They were that way with AJ Storr as well, who ended up going to Kansas. Is that they're firm about where they were at, what they could offer, and that his camp wanted more than that. And I'm going to tell you, for BYU fans, I think you guys should be ecstatic that maybe you didn't think that your program had as much money in it, funds wise, NIL wise. Well, they are, and they do, because that's why he signed at BYU, because they were the bidder that was able to give him more of what he wanted and what he requested. And I think he also knows that the Utah Jazz are near, and there's a lot of there's a lot of great basketball in Utah. So, with this whole Wabash, what's the Utah Prep Academy you guys got going on out there?
There's a Wasatch.
There's Wasatch Academy, but then you also guys just have that Utah Prep where the number player in college and high school basketball, AJ Diabonsa, signed there. So this whole there's money there in Utah. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. There's money because that Diabonsa was not going to go to some place where he couldn't, make as much money as possible and get his NIL money set up. So BYU outbid everybody. Illinois backed off. It ended up landing a very good player from Barcelona, Kasparis Jasionis, a Lithuanian player who is not projected as high as what BYU landed with Egor Demin. So a lot to be excited and happy about.
Yeah. So speaking of Illinois, you're right. So I watched a bit of Illinois, started paying attention to them as well because of the potential matchup with BYU, which unfortunately did not happen. But from what I recall, Illinois is a very physical and defensive team. Is that right? So how is his defense? How would he fit in? Or was Demin more of a recruit to come and be that offensive spark? Or did he fit in defensively as well?
I can tell you this. I think many Illini fans would have loved for that to be the case. Illinois actually, just so you guys know, was the second rated efficiency offense in the country last year. Illinois scored 90 points more than any other team in the country. Illinois would score 90 and give up 80. So that was Illinois' season last year.
Okay. I must have to reverse. Who'd you guys play now? Now I'm on the spot and I'm forgetting.
No, Illinois played and beat Morehead State in the first round, and then they ended up beating Duquesne in the next round, and then ended up beating Iowa State actually in the Sweet 16.
Maybe it was just Iowa State is what I was thinking, because they are defensive. But
yeah, they were a defensive team, and it was kind of a defensive battle. But as you guys knew, Iowa State could struggle to score the ball at times too. Illinois just had just enough offense to get by them, but then they ran into the buzzsaw known as UConn. So
heard of them.
It didn't matter. I think if Illinois had been in any other region last year, they would have went to the Final Four. But they just somebody had to play UConn in the Elite Eight. It just happened to be Illinois. So what this Demin can do, though, Illinois was after him because he's a very, very offensive-minded guy. He sets up, he handles the ball well. For a guy 6'8.5", 6'9", if you guys watch his highlights, there's a bunch of clips on him. You can just see how he creates, especially in transition. He gets to the basket very easy, and he sets up teammates for open shots. And I think, how I watched BYU last year, you needed guys, and you want guys who can create for open shooters. You guys have a lot of very good three-point shooters, and you like to have as many possessions as possible. And this guy is very good in, like I said, in transition, setting people up, and also finishing around the rim. He's very good around the rim as well. The one thing needs to work on, he is not a very consistent 3-point shooter. So I really see him having the ball in his hands a lot, creating and attacking the rim and setting up for your guys as shooters. But again, he's around 6'9", so that's really dangerous, to have a guy that big and that long who's going to be able to handle the ball like that and penetrate and get to the rim.
Do you guys think you would have used him as a primary ball handler or more of a kind of off the ball secondary guy?
From all the people I talked to over in Europe, more off the ball, not necessarily bringing the ball up court, but he's going to be a guy that can handle the ball if there's pressure. I wouldn't say he'll be your point guard, just right off the bat, but he's going to be a guy who you'll see come off screens, catch the ball, then attack the rim, create, and then definitely in transition, they're going to get him the ball. So they're going to have him push it. And so Illinois would have definitely had him push it in transition. And so Illinois signed Kylan Boswell from Arizona. So he would have been the main point guard. And then you'd have seen him probably give it up to Demin in the half court and go from there. So I'm not sure who's your main point guard option right now. Let's say, regardless of Demin, who would be your number one guy?
Dallin Hall, and he's a good point guard, and so I think if Demin does have any bringing up the ball, it might be in those minutes when Hall is on the bench, possibly, or I think it will be probably more off ball or pushing it in transition from what I've heard, and I know that's something that Kevin Young wants to do with the game, and also we lost one of our. I mean, we still have other guys, but we lost one of our transition guys who graduated, Spencer Johnson, and I'm sure Demin is going to be. It sounds like by all accounts it will be an upgrade, in that regard. So yeah,
anything else you think fans might want to know about him, or just maybe even you? What about you? Anything else or let me ask you: is it honestly surprising that for you, that BYU was able to afford him? Because we're talking, 7 figures and more. It wasn't like BYU dropped a couple $100,000.
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. But it shouldn't be too much of a surprise because we know that Kevin Young, they dug deep into pockets to pay Kevin Young to bring him down from the NBA to coach BYU. And what I think, at least myself, I don't know, other BYU fans were thinking is, did this stretch us? Did we put everything kind of in this to get Kevin Young here, or is there still going to be more? And clearly we know that some of the guys, as we mentioned, Dallin Hall, Richie Saunders, going to Kentucky, these guys were out there. We know that they were getting paid and they've come back and that they're getting taken care of. But we still didn't know on what level we were going to be competitive. But you're talking about the Jazz owner and now owner of the Utah NHL team, Ryan Smith, who it sounds like he, by all accounts, is very deep in getting people together and making sure that there are those funds. And so I don't know what happened between, why it was different under Pope versus now with Kevin Young, but it looks like they are really committed to, really investing in BYU. And I think in this case with Demin, I don't know if this is setting the bar and the standard saying, hey, we are going to be paying this going forward, or if this was just, hey, right now we really want to start Kevin Young's tenure off the right way. And we want to get these guys, we don't want to take a step back. We want to hit the ground running. And so we got to do whatever it takes to get these kind of guys in here. We're not in Illinois or, some of these other programs that are used to getting these perennial stars and really quality players. And so we have quality players, but we've just, always kind of pulled from a slightly different pool. And now Kevin Young he's going after everybody. He says, why not? And you look at the offers that he's put out there to the class of 25, and he's, putting out offers to 4 or 5 stars, and he's not afraid. And so I think they really want to change the narrative around that and say, look, we are going after everyone. We can bring these guys in. And I think he wants to show that he can develop future NBA players.
Yeah. And I think that's great too, because with the way NIL is now, there's going to be a whole lot more money. So I'm going to tell you guys, with BYU joining the Big 12, that's a lot of more money, TV dollars that BYU's getting than they weren't getting in the West Coast Conference. Okay, so I think that's just very first point and obvious, a huge deal that they joined the Big 12, to lead the West Coast Conference, not just dollars wise, TV wise, recruiting wise, players being seen a lot more often too. But I got to be honest too, 2 or 3 years ago, if you think about this, BYU was struggling in the West Coast Conference to even make the tournaments. And then all of a sudden they're in the Big 12 and they're beating Kansas and they made the tournament in 1 year. Like last year just seemed completely different from what I had been seeing from BYU over the past 3 or 4 years, because I'm just a sports nut. Like I pay attention. I watch those late night West Coast Conference games. So I would always see St. Mary's and Gonzaga 1 and 2. And then of late, you were fighting Santa Clara for the third spot you know what I mean? Like BYU third, fourth best team in that conference. And it surprised me to see how good of a first year they had in the Big 12, which I think, last year's BYU team could have easily won the West Coast Conference. Gonzaga finished strong, but I think they really weren't as good as they had been in the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, you think you were surprised. Think of how BYU fans felt. I mean, it was the tone of going into the Big 12 was very like, hey, we're happy to be here. And they really turned around. Yeah, that last year, I believe we would finish 5th in the West Coast Conference. But yeah, typically we're, kind of fighting with St. Mary's to get that second or, third spot. But yeah, a down final year. We always had good battles with Gonzaga and we could always, punk them, once a year or something. But yeah, not really doing that much versus this last year. And unfortunately, after all we had that disappointing bounce from the first round of the tournament, which is what made when Mark Pope left. So just the tone versus like how we feel now.
Was it a gut punch though when he left? Did you guys kind of feel like, what are we going to do now? Like,
yeah, I mean, some people were mad at Pope. I think generally it was like people were like, yeah, we get it. We know that Kentucky was a dream job, and Kentucky's a blue blood program that most people would, really, that they would leave most other jobs for. So it wasn't that part of it. It was just the timing of, wow, it really felt like we were building something and that we left something on the table and that we wanted to come back. And we had some recruits that were like, oh, this is going to affect us with those guys. And then we see some of our core pieces enter the portal. And now, getting Kevin Young in, who, by all accounts has been, one of the top assistant coach. He was just biding his time for a head coaching job in the NBA as a coach. And then just to look at recruit after recruit that he's been able to pull in and bring back the guys and most of that core. I mean, there were a few guys that did leave. It's funny enough that a couple of them ended at Louisville. So they're in the state of Kentucky, but not with Mark Pope. So, it's a bummer to lose those guys, but then to see what we've been able to replace them with, and we're still working. I think we still got 3 scholarships that they're working with. So I know they're still.
Yeah, well, and again, so I'm happy for you and the fan base that you got him, and glad I was able to jump on here and help you out a little bit with this because I know this is a big one for the Hoops fans, and I know we're finishing up with this and getting into football season's coming up soon. So I know I'm getting ready with Illini football stuff, and they got big visits coming this month, and then before you know it, man, then it's camp in August, and I know I'm sure you cover football, and are you would you say you're as big a football guy as you are basketball, or one more important than the other?
I would say generally more football, but I follow basketball closely, but I probably cover more football on here. But
okay,
I love it all. I mean, BYU right now is giving us reason to cover basketball.
Yeah.
more closely. I mean, I know football, a lot of people are talking about the BYU football being overshadowed by basketball right now. Are we a basketball school or whatever? I wouldn't say we're a basketball school, but right now the focus is there because that's where all the excitement is. And definitely a lot to be excited about. Granted, you still got to go play those games and we still got to, go prove it on the court. But in terms of off season, there's a lot to be excited about. But, yeah. So Ryan, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and shedding some light on Egor Demin, and sounds like despite losing out on him, Illini have plenty to be excited about in terms of basketball this
Yeah.
next season still, and off a
Yeah.
very good team. So, Ryan, how can everybody catch you and all your content? I know you cover a lot of not just Illini, but Big Ten as well. And
Yeah. So we actually, and more importantly, check out thecollegehuddle.com. Like, you have your own section and page. I have our own for Illinois, Keeping It Orange and Blue podcast, and at 200columns.com is our website. We cover all things Illini athletics. Not saying any BYU Cougar fans will really want to look into it, but we do try to have some fun. We do cover other things. We talk Big Ten, basketball, football. We might even talk some NFL when it's in season, and we just talk about anything covering some sports towards the end of the show. But yeah, so glad that we could be team up a little bit and collaborate here with the College Huddle, and that's kind of how we found each other. And he reached out to me, and so other than that, yeah, appreciate it, and thanks for having me on, man.